there! Welcome to The Accidental Badass. I'm your host, producer, and jack of all trades, Erin Hallstrom, coming to you live from the quarantine capital of the Midwest, Chicago, Illinois. Today's episode is all about advocating for your health. If you've ever left the doctor's office with more questions than answers, then this episode is for you. I do want to let you know from the outset that my guest, Katie Sue, and I do talk a bit about women's health issues. Don't let that prevent you from listening. We really cover a lot of ground about health, advocacy, and having agency over your own care in this episode. Lastly, don't forget, be sure to subscribe to The Accidental Badass on your favorite podcast streaming app. And if you're feeling generous, leave me a positive review too. Now, on to the episode. I hope you enjoy it.
You and I have shared some similar issues, some health issues, and you went through something or have gone through something in the past few years that I have been in awe of how you handled it and how you advocated for yourself. And that, to me, is a level of badassery that I don't know how many people think of it like, oh, yay, I talked to my doctor, I'm a badass. It's like, no, actually, that is an achievement to unlock, to advocate for your health that most people perhaps take for granted. So I'm excited to talk to you about kind of the journey you were on, the things you were dealing with, and just want to unpack a lot of kind of what you went through and how you did stick up for yourself and kind of things that happened and where you're at now. And one of the things that kind of got this all started was this like girl gang Facebook group that we were all a part of, and things kind of blossom from there. So can you walk me through kind of what was going on and what prompted the, hey, something's not right?
Well, that's actually kind of hard to answer because now that I know what the diagnosis was and I had so many symptoms that, I would have never in a million years put together think that they were caused by one thing. And I can trace symptoms back 15 years that I now know have come from this diagnosis. And I finally, in 2016, decided to go on a health journey. I called it my year of self-care, and questions from that led to other questions that led to other questions that led to, what is going on with my body? This can't be right.
Were your healthcare providers, like when you're saying like, hey, something's not right, is that something you were having a conversation with your healthcare providers? What was going on there? So there were lots of things kind of throughout the years, and I would ask my healthcare providers. A lot of times they were very dismissive, or they would blame it on my weight, or they would blame it on something else that I'd been doing. For instance, about 15 years ago, my menstrual cycle started becoming very irregular. And then about 10 years ago, it stopped altogether. And every year when I went in for my annual exam, I would mention this to her. Of course, I haven't had my period in a few months. I haven't had my period all year. And she would just say that was normal because I'd been on birth control for a long while. And for about 10 years, I started really getting into cardio. And so after every time that I worked out, my body would really ache, and I really attributed it to just muscle soreness or just working out hard, and I again blamed it on my weight. Well, I'm a bigger girl, so of course my body's going to hurt a little bit more.
when I started to talk to my doctor about that, she just said, oh, well, it's muscle soreness, and she wouldn't allow me to explain, no, it's really a lot more than that. Actually, I said, my thumbs had started to hurt, and I was like, oh, that's it. I've just got arthritis. I mean, arthritis runs in my family. So I went to my primary doctor and said, hey, I think I have arthritis. Will you check me? And being 38 at the time, she said, well, you don't have arthritis. I was like, well, if you could, just kind of check, that'd be great. And she did, and she found that I have arthritis kind of everywhere. And really, actually, about this time is when you had mentioned on our girl group page that you were having some similar issues. You were struggling to lose weight, your body was aching, and just lots of things that I was also going through. And you mentioned that your doctor was going to test you for a couple of things, one of them being Cushing's disease, which is an overproduction of cortisol. And as we all know, your cortisol levels are raised the more stressed out you are. So everybody knows the effect of what stress does on their body. And a lot of these symptoms, being a librarian, of course, looked it up and was like, wow, I have 95% of these symptoms. And I asked my primary care doctor if she could test me for that, in which she said, no, I can't, but, your endocrinologist can. And so I went into my endocrinologist and said, hey, I'd really like you to test me for Cushing's. And he looked at me and he said, you don't have Cushing's disease. And I said, well, and he was just basing that on the fact that I didn't have the Cushing's body, meaning my legs and my arms weren't super skinny. And then a Cushing's body also has a really round midsection, which I actually do have. It's just that my arms and legs aren't super skinny. And I actually broke down in his office, and I may or may not have yelled at him while crying, I can't live like this anymore. My body hurts all the time. I'm so stiff. I'm so sore. I can't even get out of a chair and just start walking. It takes me a few minutes to straighten up and to be able to move my body, and all of these other things that are happening. I'm starting to gain weight again after I had, started my healthy life journey. I had lost 70 pounds, plateaued, as most people do. And then actually started strength training and started cutting out all processed foods and started gaining weight. I thought, this is all in my head. Why can't I, lose weight? Why is my body hurting this way? It's definitely more than the fact that I, am a bigger girl. Like, this isn't normal. I don't know anyone. I was 38 at the time. I don't know anyone under 70 who moves the way I do. And I think my endocrinologist tested me because I had a breakdown in his office, and he was just trying to appease the crazy girl. And he gave me a pill, basically, to take at 11 o'clock p.m. and then have a blood draw at 8 o'clock in the morning. Did you go through that as well?
Yes, I've done the spit test and the pill test, the swab and the pill. So, yeah. Yes. Yep. I've done it twice.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, and they say that, cortisol is really hard to catch because your cortisol levels naturally are higher in the morning. They kind of dip down. They raise up a little bit, in the afternoon, and then lessen towards the end of the day. That's just the natural ebb and flow of cortisol. So It's hard to catch, they say, a high level of cortisol. So when I went in for the blood test, he called me a couple days later, and he's like, well, your results weren't exactly what I expected. So I'd like you to do a 24-hour urine collection, which was very exciting, as I'm sure you can probably imagine. And
yes,
when we got the results of that urine collection, he told me that my cortisol levels were about 10 times the amount of a really stressed out person.
Wow.
And sent me in for an MRI and found a tumor on my pituitary gland.
I remember when that was going on, and just like, I remember thinking, like, if you would have listened to her, before, and like, oh my God, because I think, when we deal with stuff, we never want to hope. Hey, you can tell people who have been through, like, my body, something is off, something doesn't feel right. You can tell you have reached that moment where you are almost begging for something to be found, because you're like, I'm not freaking crazy. I'm not crazy. There is something actually wrong with me. And so I'm sure, as much as you're like, oh shit, I've got a tumor, at the same time you're probably like, see, I have a tumor.
I was so relieved. And in fact, like, after reading the symptoms of Cushing's, there were some things that I was dealing with that I was too embarrassed to talk about. I was having a lot of emotional problems. My anxiety, I'd never had anxiety before. And now I was obsessing over, and it was like a healthy lifestyle, but I was obsessing over my Weight Watchers and counting my points and making sure I was, doing all the right things. And I had a mental breakdown when I went to dinner with a couple of girlfriends and realized that I couldn't substitute anything, and it was all pizza and fried chicken, and I had a breakdown. I was dealing with memory issues and just thinking, oh, well, I'm getting older, so of course my memory's going. I hate to admit this as a librarian, but I struggle with concentration. It's hard for me to sit down and read. I was starting to have some major brain fog. I was struggling sometimes to speak. I mean, the words were in my head, but I couldn't make the words come out of my mouth. And, it was like, and so I'd laugh about it. Oh, words are hard. Or, I'd joke about my memory and say, oh, well, it's just, early onset, amnesia, ha, ha, ha. And would make jokes about things. But, I was really embarrassed about, some of these things. And like you said, I was really starting to think, God, is this all in my head? What is going on here? And then my diagnosis did lead to a built-in joke, if you will, since, the tumor is on my pituitary gland. It is all in my head. I know how cheesy that is.
No, that's funny. That it really is. I mean, like, I know, so, yeah, in kind of going back to that original thing where, in our girl group, I have had since I was a young woman, I've always had period problems, and the one time I was pregnant, it was like shock of shocks that I ever got pregnant, and then I lost the pregnancy and could never get pregnant again. And I've always struggled with my weight. I know when I was 16, I had reconstructive surgery, had my jaw wired shut, lost 45 pounds in like 40 days. And having your jaw wired shut is a very fascinating case study in how to teach your 16-year-old body how to deprive itself and turn off hunger signals. And so for most of my life, I've been able to turn off that hunger signal. Like, I can move past, I can push past, hey, I'm hungry. And have gone back and forth. I've yo-yoed with my weight loss. But once I got to my 40s, it seemed like, okay, and most people who ever see me eat, who like know me more than just like a basic level, who go out with me, they're like, you barely eat anything. And I eat like a bird, like that in my family, and that's sort of reputation I eat like a bird. I pick at things. I prefer a small snack rather than a big meal. And yet I was constantly gaining weight, like, you know, working out all the time. I think right after I got my second degree black belt, I'm like, all right, I'm in some good physical shape for, you know, all intents and purposes. Kept hurting all my joints, but, you know, regardless. But anyway, just having all these issues. And I had one primary care doctor, is actually the physician, nurse practitioner, who she kind of empathized with my struggle. And I remember like putting it into the script, like, has anyone experienced this? Or, like, oh my gosh, like, this is unnerving. I was, up until a certain age, was so, like, I was doing so well, and then, like, holy shit, what the hell happened? And it was right after it was when I was 41. So, like, what's going on? No, actually, it was 42. That's what it was, because I had a really bad breakup right around my 41st birthday, and I wasn't eating a lot, and I dropped a lot of weight. And then after that, no matter what I did. Anyway, 42 years old, I'm like, okay, I've been eating healthy. I've been working out all the time. What the hell is going on? Similar thing. And she tested me, and come to find out, so this was 2 years ago, 2.5, that my issue, so both Cushing's and my issue are related to the same, related to endocrinology, but like mine is thyroid. I have an autoimmune disease in my thyroid, so my body's basically trying to it's attacking my thyroid all the time. So, and I don't know how many people realize your thyroid is the engine of your whole entire body. And so your metabolism comes to a screeching halt. You're cold all the time. Your circulation, you don't realize like how much your thyroid is responsible for things in your body. And I'm sure you can speak to this too, like how much your endocrine system. I feel like we don't talk nearly enough in any education of your endocrine system, because like hormones, you know, we joke about like, oh, so-and-so is hormonal, or look at, there's too much estrogen in this woman-only household. And it's like, holy shit. Like, no, you don't realize how much your hormones and that whole system, like, I get your thyroid, like, okay, so my hair fell out. Thankfully, I had a lot of hair, so when it started to fall out, it didn't seem as noticeable, but my hair fell out. My nails were always breaking. I had all these symptoms, and very similar to your story too, I've had anxiety and depression for a long time, but I think I just always chalk that up to, well, I've also had like I've dealt with a lot of tough stuff in my life, and that's going to make you prone to be depressed at times and anxious, and similar things like, but you know, this is kind of almost aiding and abetting, so to speak.
Right.
Like, this is like pumping it up a little more. This isn't just your average, like, no, this part of your body is contributing to that. Right. So I know that was you and I kind of had that similar, like, you know, WTF is going on with my endocrine system.
Right.
They found the tumor. You advocated for yourself. Your doctor did the MRI, had the, oh shit, I was wrong. Now what? now what happened?
Well, he really kind of walked me through what exactly was going on in my body, like my tumor on my pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland talks to the adrenal glands and tells them to produce cortisol. Well, the tumor was telling them to produce cortisol constantly. And he was actually went to school and at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, where they have a pituitary clinic and deal with a lot of Cushing's patients. And being as how Cushing's disease is considered to be pretty rare, he wanted to send me to his mentors at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. So I took a drive, big old road trip, and met with an endocrinologist there and a neurosurgeon. They had me do another MRI on because apparently their MRI machine is a little bit more advanced, and so they wanted to get a little bit better picture of my pituitary gland and where exactly the tumor was. And we talked about when we'd be able to schedule a surgery. I was diagnosed in maybe late July in the summer of 2018. Had my first appointment in Charlottesville just to get the MRI and speak with the medical team there in September. And on November the 15th of 2018, I went in for pituitary gland surgery.
So, yeah, you had legit brain surgery. Well, yeah. It's still considered, yeah. I'm not looking at an anatomy book right now, so.
Well, and really, I mean, it could go either way. I've heard people call it brain surgery. I guess technically the pituitary gland is just underneath the brain, so, I mean, but that can be splitting hairs.
It's not like you had an ear tucked or something. I mean, like you're dealing in that area of the body that one potential slip and you've completely redone this person's life or killed them. Like to me, like anything with neurosurgery is just like, yeah, y'all are worth what you get paid, because that is some nerve-wracking, pun intended, nerve-wracking area where you're at. So yeah, you were in neurosurgery area. So as far as I'm concerned, you had brain surgery. Dr. Erin is in the house. Calling that shot. And I'm sure if my mom's listening right now, she's probably like, "Oh my God, Erin, we need to have an anatomy lesson, girl." But here's a Grey's Anatomy. Sit down with it and memorize words. Honestly, my favorite part of the whole brain is the medulla oblongata, just because I love the name of it.
Well, that's really fun to say. So
It is. I hope I never need to have any part of my brain needing surgery, but access, other than, trying to come up with actual words. But, basically access. But if so, please let the word that I need to keep repeating be medulla oblongata, because it is one of my favorites. You had your brain surgery, and what
they went up through my nose. Yeah. They accessed my pituitary gland through my nose.
For all those listening, if you feel like YouTube videoing how they do that, by all means, but we're not going to talk about the nasal access of a pituitary surgery any more than that. Okay, so after they took what they needed to and weren't in your nose or your pituitary anymore, what was the recovery like?
Well, I was in the hospital for about 5 days after surgery. I don't really remember the first couple of days. I don't believe I've ever had a migraine before, but I really feel for those who have migraines. I would wake up in the morning and would have a good couple of hours, and then I would probably be back to sleeping about 2, and then would sleep kind of the rest of the day and the rest of the night. By the end of my stay there, I was definitely moving around a lot more, getting out of bed a little bit, walking down the hall. They really wanted to monitor what my pituitary gland was doing, my cortisol levels. The ideal would be to have my cortisol levels totally tank. And when you make 0 cortisol, I mean, that could be, if you make 0 cortisol, I mean, that's life-threatening. You could die without any cortisol at all. So if my cortisol level totally tanked, it means they got all of the tumor, and then they could start me on replacement cortisol. So in my case, I'm taking hydrocortisone. Well, my cortisol levels did not totally tank. They got very, very low. They wanted them to be 0. My cortisol levels, I think, tanked out at 3 point something, which means there is probably still the tiniest fragment of tumor left in my pituitary gland.
Oh.
So, yeah. As of right now, I mean, I took about 6 weeks off work. When I was sitting around, I'd be like, oh, I'm fine. I could go to work. And then I would need a nap after taking a shower because I was just totally drained and totally exhausted. For a couple of months, I was taking a really high dose of hydrocortisone because they didn't want my body to go into shock from all of that cortisol that my body was making to almost nothing. So I was taking a higher dose of cortisol. And I almost felt like, like the body pain was gone. And, I mean, it just was like, oh, wow, like this is going to be my life. I'm so excited. Like everything is going to change. And then as my dose of cortisol, hydrocortisone cut down, and I'm now on my baseline of hydrocortisone. I still deal with some of those issues. And I really think that it's because, I've been dealing with, there's no way of telling for sure, how long I had the tumor, but I mean, if I can trace symptoms back for 15 years, it probably had it for that long or longer.
Who knew having a breakdown could become a breakthrough? This is my segue to kind of the next part of what I want to talk about is that health advocacy of, I think your story, that what I know of you and as I've followed, the things that you've been dealing with because of this, you and I, similar stories. And it's like yours is pituitary and Cushing's, mine, autoimmune disease and of the thyroid. It's like these are real things. It hasn't been in our head, but trying to get to that point where it's like, yeah, this wasn't in my head. That's the thing that I struggle with, and I think a lot of people probably struggle with their own health issues. It's like, what does a person need to do to be heard or to be paid attention to more?
Exactly. And I think for me, one of the biggest things was, like I've said, I have a bit of weight on me. I'm a bigger girl. And, a lot of the things that I was dealing with, they chalked it up to my weight. Well, and nobody believes the fat girl. The fat girl is always in the fridge at 2:00 in the morning, and crying the next day why she can't lose weight. Well, at this, and I admit I have been that girl. I have. At this particular time in my life, I was not that girl. I was 100%, and I mean 100% on top of it. And exercising and strength training and, eating, whole foods and, cut out all processed foods and cut out all added sugars. And I mean, I was 100% on it and was still gaining weight and also dealing with the body pain and, like the bones in my feet felt like they were going to crack because the cortisol was sucking, the nutrients out of my bones. And but again, well, your feet hurt because you're fat. And your body hurts because you're fat. If you would just lose weight, and weight was a symptom. One of the symptoms of Cushing's disease, of high cortisol, just of stress, is weight gain. You know, and so they were treating symptoms and not ever putting anything together to find the cause, which is what you were dealing with too.
I know. Kind of chatting a little bit before we recorded, one of the things we had talked about, and I don't know how many medical folks are listening to this episode and could probably be like, oh, hell yeah, ladies, you have no idea. But like you and I were talking earlier, and I was mentioning so this year I have had, I have my thyroid autoimmune. Like, I know that. I'm, I have that. I'm hypothyroid. So, yeah, my thyroid is just like, F you, woman. But then, and so that's endocrinology. And then I have something called PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian disease, or syndrome disease. And that's OBGYN, but it's also endocrinology. But I remember last year, 2 years ago, I had a very large ovarian cyst that went in to have, OBGYN was checking it out. I had 2 assessments by 2 separate OBGYNs of what to do. And one of the doctors that I met with recommended surgically removing it. She had recommended at the time remove 1 ovary and both fallopian tubes. Keep 1 ovary so that I could still have the estrogen because I was not yet at the age to be in menopause. And so I remember I'm like, and again, this thing hurt. It was the size of a slightly smaller than a grapefruit, but bigger than a baseball. So I guess the size of a softball. Sitting, and it was on my right side. It was, and ladies and gentlemen who are listening, I want you to go grab a softball and go put that on your abdomen and see how that feels. Okay, so I'm in pain, and I'm listening to it. Like, yes, please, yes. If my insurance will cover it, please rip the damn things. Take all the plumbing you want out. I don't want kids. Take it out. Whatever you need. And I'm in pain, and I'm kind of scared because again, this thing hurts, and all I keep hearing is I have to go on bed rest for the next couple of weeks because God forbid this thing twists, and then I have to go to the ER. Because that was kind of you just bed rest or else go to the ER. And I swear there's a point here because after I'm dressed and the doctor's walking out the door, she makes a comment to me of, and please, once this is resolved, please promise me you're going to lose weight. And it was just one of those things that had I had my faculties about me, and maybe the fact that it was during business hours helped her, I was so livid. Livid. That I was ready to, like, whatever thing for the doctor's office, I was ready to tear into them. I'm like, how fucking dare you? I didn't tell her that. I wish I would have. And she's now since left the practice, so it's like good riddance.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember thinking that, and I remember bawling my eyes out on my drive home to my mom, like, can you believe what she said? And like the fact that I was in pain escaped. It was, can you believe that she said that? I was like, did she not read my chart? And she's like, Erin, she probably didn't even care. She wouldn't. It's your OBGYN. That's a different part of the chart. And it's like, and I think to me, so I have OBGYN and I have endocrinology. And like this year, I've seen both of those different doctors this year, and I've told them that I've had these same issues going on. I told both of them. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to test you for the female hormones, for the stuff with your ovaries and uterus, because we're OBGYN. And we're going to test you and your thyroid and your this because we're endocrinology. And I've been telling my mom, I'm like, why do the two of them not talk to one another? Because I have to go get blood work tomorrow, and this will be the third time this year. I have a nutrient, I'm very severely vitamin D deficient, and severely. And for this whole entire, with all of the other health stuff that I've had going on, no matter how much I've taken, it's not moving the needle. And so my mom and I have actually like been charting. My mom and I have been our own, kind of doctor house diagnosticians of like, all right, what are all the different things? And so like getting my blood work tomorrow, hearing back like, so help me God, I almost to that pituitary thing. It's like, so help me God, I hope it's down, because that becomes I hope it's still down, because I keep telling you, I'm using that pivoting point, or I'm using that, like, my goddamn, I have jacked my vitamin D up intake every time you've told me, and it's still not absorbing. So someone pay the F attention. I'm calling a meeting, and if I have to sit y'all down. But, like, even with my mom, who is a nurse, like, just I have done more for my own health records than people who are medically trained to recognize things. And I think that's what's frustrating. And one of the things, like, I definitely, you and I have a lot in common. It's like, listen, like, I'm telling you something's not right. I have such empathy. Similar story. I have heard so many things in my life of, oh, you're cute for a fat girl, or you'd be so much hotter if you were thinner, or all these other things. So it's like, you know what, you're a great friend, but I'm just not physically attracted to you. That I swear to God, sometimes I just want to put, or when I see people like complain, oh, just eat less, honey. Like, just fewer calories. Like, that's the sort of shit that makes me like, you know what? Screw you. I am the hormonal disorder. Like, I am that. So, yes, I've been reading, like, so with my hypothyroid, thyroid autoimmune, and PCOS, it's like, and similar thing. I thought I had arthritis, too, and I have it in my joints. Arthritis. I have osteoarthritis, and it's granted, like, I have ground my joints to the nubs, but it's like, it's a freaking perfect storm of, okay, well, I had to have this radical self-acceptance this year of, this is my body, this is me, this is it, and so help me God, if a doctor doesn't listen, I will have an in-office breakdown if in this next visit, doctor doesn't listen to what I'm saying. So, all right, my diatribe is over.
Well, and I'm just like, if that's what's going to, if all it is they're going to test you for something just to appease the crazy woman in their office, then it's worth it to have a breakdown.
Well, and I remember being in the endocrinologist's office last December, and I'm telling her, and it was a nurse practitioner, and wasn't a real fan of her anyway, but for different reasons. But I'm telling her, I'm like, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and the weight still isn't moving, and stuff is still feeling a certain way. And I remember, and she's like, have you had any significant things? And my father had died within the last month. She's like, oh, we'll chalk all of that stuff up to that. And it's like, and while I understand on some level, it's like, this is an office I see every 6 months. Like, please give me more than, well, your father just died, so that's probably why all these things. The father died 3 weeks prior. Like, all those things have been going on for the 6 months prior. So please don't. And it's like, freaking listen to me when I'm talking.
Exactly.
And what do I have to do? I'm telling them I go the breakdown route. Everyone stay posted. And I laugh, but I'm laughing because, it's like, what do you have to do? What do you have to do to be heard?
Right. Well, and I had a similar thing with my primary care physician. Of course, I told you about the arthritis, and she didn't want to test me, and I was having trouble losing weight, and I was telling her, well, I do cardio 3 times a week, and I do strength training 2-3 times a week, and I'm doing all these things right. And she goes, oh, well, you just need to exercise more. And she's like, okay, well, I don't really think I can. I can barely move as it is, And in fact, I had been, one of the things that I love to do was Zumba. I would, for a long time, I was going to Zumba like 3-4 times a week, and it got to the point where I can't move my body like that. The only cardio that I can do is water aerobics, because it is so so much less stressful on your body. And that's the only thing I can do right now.
Yeah, anyone who does not believe that overweight people do not get discriminated against in doctors' offices, I implore you, just go into a doctor's office with an overweight person and see how dismissive they are of your symptoms, and just blame everything on your weight. Even if you tell them, I can't lose weight, how much of that is like,
and that goes back to nobody believes the fat girl.
No one believes the fat. I think, like, the issues that we've both experienced, and I was saying this earlier, have given me such empathy. So, like, I don't anymore. If when you see someone, you never judge a person. You do not judge someone's weight. I don't care if they seem too thin for your taste or too overweight for your taste. You don't know anyone's health history, so shut up.
Exactly. And I've come to know that, there are invisible illnesses. Like, you can't see that you have an autoimmune disorder. You can't see that, my body is attacking itself from the inside. I mean, you just don't see that. So you don't know what people are going through in their health and why they can't lose weight or why they can't gain weight. You just don't know what people are going through.
Right. This episode isn't just about advocating for yourself. It's also about advocating for other people too. Don't be well, and
I think that's what's so great about doing this podcast and on this topic is that people don't talk about these things. It's important. And for me, if you hadn't said you were going through these issues, I might not have ever found out what was going on with me. And, all of those things, all of those symptoms, Cushing's can kill you.
Yeah.
So if you hadn't spoken up, I could be, who knows? And I think that it's really important that, you talk about some things that you're going through and maybe,
Yeah, I remember a similar thing. I had found, so right after my 40th birthday, I remember that because I found it the night of my 40th birthday. I found a lump in my breast and had it removed. And that was a chaotic month. Like, got in there, I have a, pretty serious family history of breast cancer, had the lump removed within a month. And I remember me talking about that on my Facebook page, like, oh, yeah, like I found something, this is what's happening. And a friend of mine, was hesitant to schedule a mammogram, scheduled hers, and she had breast cancer, like full on, I think, stage 1 breast cancer. And it's like, and she's like, you just talking about your lump kind of gave me the courage to, I'm going to do that. And as much as we're sitting here talking and we're friends and we felt safe enough to have the conversations with one another. And I'm not sitting here saying like, hey, everybody, put all of your health history on social media.
Well, of course.
But there is something to be said for just that level of community and vulnerability. And I think so many of us are afraid to say the unspoken thing because we're embarrassed. We feel like, oh man, I struggle with saying I struggle with depression. Like, I can't believe I struggle with telling people, like, I struggle with depression. I know I seem happy-go-lucky a lot and very, funny, ha-ha, and I'm resilient. It's like, well, yeah, but I also get deep, deep, dark depression, and it's something I try really hard. But anyway, it's like, yeah, own some of your, like, people, like, that sense of community, the people who genuinely are happy for you and want to support you will help you. And secondly, and I don't think I realized this until probably the past 5-6 years, how much one person telling their story helps open up, give someone else the bravery to go check it out for themselves, or be like, you know what? And I think that, to me, that's a big part of why I wanted to do this podcast. So, like, just this, not just this episode, but the whole series. Just like, you never know whose life you're going to touch and in what way. Because my hope is that someone or multiple someones are listening to this episode and they're like, you know what? I've had similar things too. You know what? I've had that brain fog. I've had that can't lose weight. I've had those things. You know what? Maybe I am going to speak up to my doctor, or I've had something that my doctor hasn't listened to me for. I hope upon hope that someone listening will be like, you know what? I'm going to go get it checked out, because the two of you talked about it and kind of gave me that sense of, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. So I appreciate your vulnerability being with me here on the recording tonight. Don't want anyone thinking that we broke COVID protocol, that we're sitting in a living room together, but right. So COVID stuff aside, and I'm not saying you've had COVID, because that's, I'm not going to violate HIPAA if you've had it, whatever. Whatever. But how are you?
No COVID
feeling?
here.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. Same. So, okay, with your COVID negativity, your COVID negative, how are you doing now? So it's been almost 2 years now from your surgery. And, yeah, how are things now? How's life? How's kind of circling back to the very beginning? How are things now?
I'm definitely, I've definitely noticed some things that are improving. I think I really tried to keep myself, in check, because, when I right before I found out about the tumor, I was in a really low place. I found out about the tumor, I had an answer, and that it felt like that, that like a weight was lifted. And I really thought, wow, this is going to be the answer to all of my problems. After I get the tumor removed and I have some time to recover, I will feel like normal. And I don't really know if I'll ever feel, normal. And as much as I tried to keep myself in check, I think I let myself believe that this was going to cure everything. I still struggle with some things, and I'm really actually just kind of coming to terms with this is probably how it's going to be from now on. I'm still going to have some body pain. I'm still going to, my arthritis is, going to get worse. In fact, I'm 41 and going in at the end of the month for a total knee replacement surgery due to my arthritis. So, which at least it'll be fixed and it'll be good. So it's a good thing that I'm going to be able to do this. But that's my body deteriorating so quickly, and it's been a little difficult starting to come to terms with the fact that I'm going to be dealing with a lot of this stuff, forever. But on the other hand, I know why it's happening, and I know, that I've done what I can do and will continue to do things like eat healthy and exercise and the things that I can do to keep, my body as healthy as I can. And I'm glad I went through that journey because, like I said, I was starting to be in a really dark place, not knowing, and just having an answer, even though, I'm still going to be dealing with things. Having the answer, kind of saved me from that.
Do you have any advice? And I say this is, we are lay people. We are
right.
We're not experts in we're not. I don't want to say we're not experts in health advocacy, but we aren't like official medical experts, I guess. So right. I say that with that grain of, for anybody listening who's maybe on the fence or they're not sure, and like I said, maybe they're listening and they're like, oh, you know what, I had some stuff and I'm just not sure. Do you have any advice for that person who's listening and interested in hearing, like, okay, you know what, ladies, I need that one push. Just give it to me straight. Do you have any advice for who don't feel like they're being heard?
My biggest thing is you live in your body. You know that something's not right. You know your body. Write everything down. Write all the things you're dealing with down. Write down your symptoms, because in the moment you're going to forget something. And if you forget, so that could be the key to unlocking what's going on. So write everything down. And don't let them get away with saying it's your weight, because that's not always, that's not always the cause. I mean, look for the cause versus just treating the symptoms. And one piece of advice that I had gotten is because Cushing's is so rare, a lot of people struggle to either get tested or since cortisol is hard to catch, if they have negative tests, then they immediately rule it out, even though that could still be what's going on. And something that somebody told me was, if they refuse to test you for something that you've done your research, you've got the symptoms, you know what's going on in your body, if they refuse to test you, have them write that in your record that you requested that test and they refused.
Yeah, you know what? I just saw, I forget where I saw it, but like an actual verbiage on what that exact same thing, that if you're requesting and advocating and your healthcare professional or professionals aren't testing you, put it down. I want to see you put it in my chart right now. Type that in there, that I asked for the thing and you're not, and you're refusing. Put that in the notes.
Right.
I want that documented. I think that's so important. And I genuinely hope at least one person listening to this might change, like help them decide, yes, I'm going to go talk to my doctor about that thing that doesn't feel right. I hope so, because I think we need.
Me too.
I think, and kind of getting back to the name of the podcast and kind of the reason why I felt your story was important. Other than like Cushing's, like you said, it's not a lot of people have it. It's it's a fairly rare thing, but just I think advocating for yourself, especially with your health, because as you said, you only have one body. You can get things replaced within that body to a certain extent, but you only have one body. And once some of the major things start going kaput, that's it. You're done. And you have to advocate. You have got to stand up for yourself and when things aren't right. And there's a level of badassery that is not often noticed, I think. It's not noticed enough. Like how many people, how hard it is sometimes to get a diagnosis when you've lived in your body for, months, years with an issue. And it's like, I'm telling you, it's not right. Something does not feel right. Someone listen to me. And
it's sometimes it's hard as, like you said, a layperson to speak to obviously a medical doctor with their, degrees and all of their knowledge. It's hard to speak to somebody like that and say, listen, but your body. They don't know how you're feeling or what's going on. So you have to be sure to tell them, even if it is embarrassing. Like, I didn't want to tell my male endocrinologist that I haven't had a period in 10 years. But you have to explain all of the things. And don't be shy to tell them what's going on. And that is so important. I know with me, I can't believe the number of health-related apps I have on my phone. I have apps that I will plug in, and we're talking like I have a headache, I have an upset stomach on a particular day. There are things that are probably related that I may not have thought of. I write things down. I write down what I eat. I write down the vitamins and supplements that I take, and then catalog the numbers, the data that I've collected on myself, so that when I go back for my next 6-month appointment in a couple of months, and it's like, all right, I'm sitting here. No one probably will bring you as much hard data on their body as
Well, maybe they will. But like, here, no, I'm telling you, I'm not just making this up. And this is where, I'm thankful and grateful for my mom, who, being a nurse and, her telling, data. You want to be, and I will say that, she has told me that she's instilled that in me, that, and I feel like that, even with my work for what I do, and with a lot of, if you're trying to plead a case of something, data. Get data.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah, there are certain things that's all right, this is what happened. This is what I've eaten. This is the supplement I've taken. This is what time I've done this. This is how much sleep I got. I'm plotting all of this out for you, doctor, so that you can see I'm not just sitting here telling you, woe is me.
And the smallest detail could...
It could be the thing that it's like, and to me the vitamin D number, I'm missing a period for a while. That is just, I think age too. I got a lot of stuff on. Well, you're in your mid-40s. You're not quite perimenopausal, not quite, but you're also in your mid-40s. So we expect that, and that was the most I didn't have a period for 6 months, and you're telling me, well, that's to be expected. You're getting to that age. No, I'm telling you, that's not a problem. No one else thinks that's a problem. You guys have tested my estrogen and, this and that, and you're saying it's fine, but no one else thinks this is a problem. And then that's when it's well, my vitamin D, no matter, you guys have told me to double it, triple it, quadruple it. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's okay, so something's not absorbing. I'm not having a period, and there's other health stuff. And it's that's where I'm kind of armed. I feel like an Army general going into my endocrinology appointment. That will happen in December. That it's all right, stuff is not right, and I'm coming armed with all the stuff I've been doing, and so help me God, if you don't listen this time, I will raise hell, and in a doctor's office can't really ask to speak to the manager, but I might Karen. If there's one time to be that, it's you're not listening to me. I want you to put down on my chart.
It's definitely okay to be a Karen when you're advocating for your health.
yeah, for your health. Yeah. So one time, it's okay.
Right.
But yeah. Any Karens actually listening to this, I hope you have a sense of humor. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
I just, in advocating for your health and taking those steps, sometimes starting the journey can be hard, but it's worth it. Taking care of yourself and helping yourself to find how you can maybe heal yourself or help yourself feel better and live your life, you're worth it.
I think that is the best way to sign off of this episode, because that's right. You are worth it. Everyone listening, even those people who aren't. we're wishing you love and light, even if you're not listening. But yes,
that's right.
It's great. It's great advice, and the best way to end this episode. So thank you for being on the podcast tonight. This was so informative, and I think we wound up talking way longer than we anticipated we would, which I don't see anything wrong with, especially on an issue like this. So thank you so much, and it was absolutely great having you on the Accidental Badass podcast tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'll be thinking about you and wishing you the best in your continued health journey.